The lights died during the toast, the way a song cuts off mid-note and leaves your mouth hanging open. 1 second, we were raising crystal flutes to Noel's 45th. His house, his wine, his rules. And the next, darkness folded over the room like a theater curtain. I smelled the candle wax before I could see it, hot and sharp, the scent of birthdays and burned fingers. Someone laughed, nervous, and then someone else swore softly, close enough that I felt the word on my ear like breath. "Fuse box," Noel said from the head of the table, his voice smooth as the stones on his bracelet. Then a thud, chair legs skittering against hardwood, the quick scrape of shoes. I stood, my hip bumping the table. Champagne kissed my wrist, sticky and cold. In the dark, the big windows turned into black mirrors. We were 12 versions of ourselves, cut out of the night. A phone flashlight bloomed, then another. In the white cones, faces too bright, pupils too big, hands hovering over linen. I could hear the rain whispering against the glass, a steady hush. Portland rain is practical rain. It never apologizes for itself. "Everybody chill," said Jonah, the kind of grown man who wears a beanie to a dinner party. His light shook as he moved. "Noel? Bro, you good?" From the kitchen came a sound like a dropped spoon. Then the smell, a metallic bloom that elbowed the candle wax out of the room. I'm a nurse. My body recognized it before my mind let me say it. Copper. Blood. Zoe's voice, small. "Why is it so quiet?" Because we were listening for a breath that didn't come. Because we knew, even before the lights surged back and the room slapped into color, that the party had become a crime scene. Noel lay at the threshold between kitchen tile and hardwood, half in one room and half in the next, like he was trying to choose a side. His eyes were open in a way that made the whole world look too bright. The stem of his glass had snapped. There was red on the white marble like a hostile signature. I didn't scream. I knelt. I pressed 2 fingers to his neck, where the pulse should have been soft and stubborn. The skin was cooling, the blood was not. In the corner of my vision, a tiny blue light pulsed on the Super Zero fridge, the only heartbeat in the room. "Call 911, I said, and my voice sounded wrong in my throat. Right now. Nobody moved for a second. The paralyzed second between living and admitting. Then chairs scraped, phones lifted, whispers rose. The speakers were still playing the playlist Noel made for himself, French pop and old soul, and the lyrics sounded cruel in the new air. 12 guests, 1 dead host. The storm pressing its face to the glass like it wanted a better look. If you'd asked me at 6 p.m. whether any of us could kill Noel, I would have told you no, and I would have been at least half right. But who was the other half? And what did I miss in the dark that everyone else swore they didn't see? My name is Ivy Mercer, 29, RN at Providence Portland Medical Center. Night shift mostly, which means my circadian rhythm lives in a different zip code than my friends. I prefer the hour after midnight when the city sighs and the machines on the floor do their small, labored breaths, and the janitor radios murmur like distant bees. Night is when people tell the truth without meaning to. You learn to hear it, the scrape of a lie, the small shame of a secret. Noel arrived at the ER 2 months ago with a cut on his hand that should have been nothing, and somehow was not. He called it an accident, wine glass, late night opening a stubborn bottle, but the jagged line on his palm had the careful wildness of a human thing, not a glass thing. He joked while I irrigated the wound, he laughed while I wrapped the dressing, and then, when he thought I wasn't looking, he stared at the blood seeping through the gauze like he wanted to fall in. "I throw a birthday party every year," he told me, voice lighter than the words. "Last year, someone cried. The year before, someone proposed. I feel like I should up the ambition." "And this year?" I asked. "This year," he said, smiling, "I want nothing dramatic to happen at all." Noel was the kind of person who made nouns behave like verbs: curate, host, orbit. He owned a design firm in the Pearl that activated spaces for people who could afford to have their lives adjusted. He wore bracelets like a man who liked to hear himself move. He fed compliments with both hands. He called me a steady soul, which is a nice way of saying I didn't ask for favors. How I ended up on his guest list is either simple or complicated, depending on where you start. Start with Zoe, my best friend since we were 14, and she lent me a sweater that I definitely never gave back. She's a copywriter with a sailor's mouth and a magician's timing. She dated Noel for 6 months last year. She says she broke up with him. He says it was mutual. I say it depends what you call the moment when someone learns who you are. Then there's Jonah, my ex. He's a freelance photographer who used to leave rolls of film all over our apartment like he needed proof the world still existed when we weren't looking at it. We were together 3 years. We are now good, which is another word that looks sturdy on paper and falls apart in the sink. He and Noel became friends through a charity thing involving rescued greyhounds and minimal information about money. After I moved out, Jonah started showing up at Noel's dinners, which is how Zoe started showing up again, and I stayed away because nurses know when a room is sterile and when it isn't. Except Noel has gravity. People like him build rooms the way spiders build webs: beautiful, radial, easy to walk into, hard to leave without remembering the touch. He sent me a message 3 weeks ago, a simple, "Zoe says you're the only adult in this friend group. Dinner 10:14? Please come be our chaperone." It made me laugh. It also made me suspicious. But he added, "Bring whoever you want. It's my birthday, not a cult." I brought myself and a small bottle of anxiety. Noel's house sat on a hill in the Northwest Hills, a modern cube of glass and scorched wood that looked like it knew how to pronounce architect. When the wind came off the river, the paneled siding made a sound like low cello. The entryway smelled like eucalyptus and something citrus that didn't exist in nature. In the living room, a Jasper Johns print that might have been real, shelves of books no one touched, a bar cart dressed better than any of us. The guest list, curated: Noel, birthday king; Vivian, his business partner, a woman whose cheekbones could open envelopes; Rafi, the firm's lead architect, forever on the edge of being canceled for seeing one thing that sounded like 3; Zoe, who arrived with lipstick that made promises and a skirt that kept them; Jonah, beanie, smile, camera bag, apology; Dr. Kelling Reed, Noel's neighbor and sometime tennis partner, a cardiologist who believed in magnesium and telling women to hydrate when they were sad; Morgan, Kellen's wife, whose eyes were the color of money when it doesn't feel guilty; Troy, Noel's contractor, forearms like arguments; Lydia, Troy's girlfriend, wonderfully kind, as if she had not been told the price of anything; Georgia, a painter whose canvases looked like storms learning grammar; and me, nursing, not drinking because I was on call, wearing a black dress that did nothing for the drama but made me feel honest. If our night had needed a chorus, it was the weather. Rain polite enough to leave us alone until we wanted it to knock. So when the lights died and Noel fell, I had a full roster of suspects before I had a diagnosis. That's the trouble with working in a hospital. You learn how many ways there are to die, and how many more there are to wish someone would. And I already knew 7 days beforehand who had reasons to want Noel to stop talking, but which reason turned into a plan. If you rewind the evening, you can hear the fuse blow before anyone touches the panel. What I mean is, The trouble was already in the wires. The darkness was waiting its turn. I arrived early because Zoe asked and because nurses are allergic to being late. Noel hugged me like a man who collects hugs and keeps them sorted by year. His shirt was white and soft enough to make me think of napkins you aren't supposed to use. The kitchen smelled like garlic and good butter and something bright. Lemon zest, maybe. Jazz hid in the corners. "You look like peace," he said, stepping back to see me the way hosts always do. "Thank you for coming. I need at least one person who doesn't stage whisper in italics." "I'm here for the snacks," I said. "Because you're the only person I know who will eat the olives with pits and not complain they're a choking hazard." He gave me a tour as if I hadn't been there twice before. He touched everything as he named it. An inventory is love language. The pendant lights, the ceramic bowls, the eucalyptus branches that would be compost tomorrow because beauty mattered precisely as much as it lasted. In the pantry, he showed me the electrical panel as part of a joke about modernity. It controls half my personality. And I noticed the labels written in tidy print. Dining, LR, kitchen, Sub-Zero. And one breaker marked garage wine that someone had crossed out and rewritten. The neatness made me like him more and trust him less. Guests arrived in clumps, bringing umbrellas that Noel's entry bench made look cheap. Zoe kissed my cheek and whispered, "Don't let me say anything weird," which is like asking water to avoid wet. Jonah hovered near the bar cart and asked me about the hospital with the tone of someone who wants to say you look good, but isn't sure which drawer to find it in. Vivian and Rafi argued about a client's taste, which sounded like surgery performed without anesthesia. Georgia stood at the window and watched the backyard pines sway like men deciding whether to dance. Morgan and Kellen did a lap, checking the house for signs of decay. Doctors always notice infrastructure. Dinner was long table, linen, black plates so matte they ate the light. Noel made a toast at 8:02 that was all explicit gratitude and implicit Noel. We ate a soup so delicate it tasted like suggestion. We ate halibut that broke under the fork like a secret told too late. We ate a salad that wanted to be summer and a cake that wanted to be somebody's last meal. The first odd thing, Noel didn't drink. He raised his glass, sure. He even tapped it with his ring, but he never swallowed. The second odd thing, Troy asked twice to see Noel's new garage wine fridge as if appliances were a love language. Noel deflected with the grace of a politician whose scandal hadn't leaked yet. The third thing, which I told myself wasn't odd until it was, Noel kept glancing at the pantry door like it owed him money. At 10:40, Noel stood to make his final and least annoying toast and reached for the dimmer switch. He liked to orchestrate the mood. The overhead slid down, the candles took over. He began to speak. The room leaned forward. The house went black. By 10:44, Noel was dead. If the fuse blew then, what had been humming hot all night and whose hands were already on the panel? While we waited for sirens, the rain changed its handwriting, thicker strokes, harder consonants, beating the glass like it wanted in. I moved automatically, the way training gives your body permission to borrow your brain. I checked Noel again. I looked for a wound I could do something about. There was a small cut on his palm, reopened. There was a shallow dent on his temple, as if the floor had tried to convince him of its existence. The blood came from his mouth. Pink foam at the lips, a ring of red around his tongue like he'd sipped a lie. Choking? Mergen ventured, one hand on Kellen's sleeve as if medicine were transferable by touch. "Not unless air looks like this," I said. "Could be an embolus. Could be..." My mouth didn't want the word. "Could be poison." Silence has textures. This one had grit. "Poison?" Lydia said, small. "Like movie poison?" "There isn't a kind that isn't real," I said. Jonah crouched beside me and lifted the broken stem, careful, as if the glass could still shatter. "Someone broke this when the lights went out. Or earlier," Georgia said. Her voice did something strange on the last syllable, dropped, like it had stepped off a curb she hadn't seen. Zoe hovered near the pantry door, not touching it, fingers worrying the hem of her skirt. "I'm calling again," she said, as if 911 were a friend who might pick up if you hurt enough. "They said they're on their way." Kellen looked at the table as if it might explain itself. He announced too loud, in the way of men who like their voices to be the tallest in the room. He had risk factors. "Which ones?" Vivian snapped. "Male, stress, ego," Zoe said before he could. "What did he eat?" Rafi asked, eyeing the plates like he could identify motive by garnish. "Everything," Troy said. "Noelle eats everything." "Except his toast," I said, and the room looked at me like I'd confessed to something. "He didn't drink. He touched the glass and didn't drink." "Maybe he was pacing himself," Vivian said. "Not everyone binge drinks feelings, Zoe." Zoe's mouth opened. I touched her wrist, a small pressure that said, "Not now." Sirens climbed the hill. Lights smeared blue on wet glass. The paramedics did what paramedics do: arrive, assess, confirm what the room already knew and hated. Time of death now, plus however many minutes we'd wasted being human. A patrol car followed. The officers were young in that Portland way. Earnest eyes, rain on their shoulders, patience they measured in inches. One took names, one took photos, one took our phones and put them in a baking pan lined with paper towels, like a nursery for dangerous things. Detective May Allen arrived at 11:22, which is how I know the city cares when rich men die. She had the kind of face that listens even when it looks like it isn't. She walked slow, as if the floor might confess underfoot. She knelt by Noelle, not touching, and looked at what I'd already seen. Her eyes moved like a second hand, patient, precise. "Who turned off the lights?" she asked without looking up. "The house did," Rafi said, all brittle clever. "It's moody." "The breakers are in the pantry," Troy offered too quickly. Detective Allen's eyes ticked to the door. "And who went in there after 10 o'clock?" No one spoke. Even the rain took a breath. My mind did the thing it does during codes, split itself into an observer and an actor. The observer watched the guests like a nurse watches monitors, Vivian's jaw set to litigation, Kellen's shoulders hunched against accountability, Morgan's fingers in a rhythmic rub-rub-rub against her wedding band. Troy's hands made fists and unmade them. Lydia's eyes flicked between faces as if she'd missed the first half of the movie and hoped to catch up before the twist. Georgia's gaze kept sliding to Noelle's mouth, like she left a thought there. Zoe stood so still, you could have hung a painting on her. Detective Allen stood and said, "We're going to treat this as a suspicious death. Until a doctor tells me otherwise, nobody leaves." The house exhaled. The lights stayed on. The rain reminded the glass who owned it. "Suspicious," she said, as if any of us had been anything else all night. But which of us had upgraded from suspicious to lethal? Allen separated us into the living room and the kitchen, like a teacher who knows which kids cheat when they sit together. She asked me to walk her through what I saw, and I did, as cleanly as I could slice it. Darkness, thud, smell, blood, glass. She asked about medical history. I offered what I knew and what I didn't. Then she asked to see the electrical panel. The pantry was a small white room that looked like a magazine lied. Shelves with labeled jars, quinoa, farro, pistachios, stacked in hierarchy. A marble counter like a quiet moon. The stainless panel at the back. The air smelled like cinnamon and concrete dust. The scent of new homes and old appetites. Allen used a pen to tap the breaker for dining/LR. No scorch marks. No obvious malfunction. Then she tapped garage/wine, the one with the scribbled rewrite. "Who fixed this label?" she asked me. "No idea," I said. "But Noelle showed me the panel when I arrived. He pointed it out like a joke. He said, it controls half my personality." "Does it?" she asked. I looked at the label again, at the careful handwriting and the uneven overwrite. Noelle liked his labels tidy. which means somebody else touched it or Noelle was in a hurry. She pulled a nitrile glove from her pocket and tugged it on with that satisfying snap. She opened the panel. Inside, neat toggles. On the inner door, a strip of double-sided tape with nothing on it. "What's missing?" I asked. "A magnet or a keycard. Something that used to live right here." She closed the panel. Her eyes scanned the shelves, the floor, the empty strip like a divining rod. Then she crouched and reached under the lowest shelf with 2 fingers. She came up with a small plastic thing with a blue logo. A fob. "What does that open?" I asked. "Let's go find out." We did. The garage was downstairs, clean enough to operate on. Untouched tools hung on pegboards with outlines like cartoon corpses. The wine fridge Noelle wouldn't show Troy sat in the corner, humming its own weather. Alan held the fob to the little square sensor on the door. A green light winked. The latch chirped. The door swung. On the top shelf, a single bottle sat with a gold ribbon around its neck. Chateau d'Armeliac, 2009, a wine even my nurse's salary knows it can't afford. On the label, a sticky note in Noelle's tidy print, "Don't let Zoe pour." It should have been funny. It wasn't. The foil capsule had a miniature puncture, like a mosquito bite. Alan's face didn't change, but the room felt colder. She used a cloth to lift the bottle into a bag, then scanned the shelf again, the floor fridge, the lip of the door, as if evidence loved corners. A second sticky note clung to the shelf above, half unstuck, its own confession. "Rafi, no." It would have been a joke if the night had remembered how. Someone prepped the bottle. Before the toast, before the lights. Someone with the fob. Or someone who borrowed the fob. We looked at each other over the hum of the fridge. Alan sealed the bag. "Ivy, I need you to help me with something delicate. When I bring them down to look at this, I want you to watch their faces. You don't have to say anything. Just tell me who recognizes it before they know they've recognized it. Because nurses know the difference between shock and surprise. Because liars blink." We went back upstairs, the rain still making itself known, the house still pretending to be a house. Alan gathered them one by one, like strings pulled into a knot. When she showed the fob and the bottle and the note, 3 things happened at once. Ruffy laughed too loud, then cut it off like he'd been caught laughing at a funeral. Vivian looked at the fob the way auditors look at receipts. Jonah touched his pocket, reflex, as if checking for a camera he didn't bring. And Zoe? She didn't move at all. The bottle had been waiting all night with its small, neat wound, that whose hands had made it and who had watched them do it. Detective Allen split us for statements. I told myself not to look at Jonah because my face still thinks it can fix the past. I told myself not to look at Zoe because we were both too honest to lie convincingly for each other. I told myself not to think about the tiny puncture in the foil cap because a thing that small shouldn't be able to kill a room. Alan took the wine to the car for the Tex. When she returned, she asked us to walk her through our movements between 10 and the blackout. The answers made a mosaic that didn't quite tile. Vivian. I was in the bathroom fixing eyeliner because Noelle believes in speeches you can see from space. She did not look at Rafi when she said it. Rafi. I was showing Georgia a sketch on my phone for a pavilion roof that doesn't actually exist yet. Then Noelle dimmed the lights like a theater kid, and here we are. He smiled at his own charm as if it were billable. Georgia. I was listening. Her voice had that hollow bell quality of people for whom grief and alcohol share a drawer. Troy. I was in the kitchen. Yes, because the roast looked like it wanted to be saved. I didn't touch the panel. He touched his forearm instead, a thumb making a slow circle over a scar so white it looked like absence. Lydia. I was texting my sister about the dog she's watching for us. He has anxiety. She sounded like she was trying to borrow some. Kellen, I was reviewing my messages. We had a post-op tonight. Doctors like timestamps. They build alibis without meaning to. Morgan, I was not in the pantry. Why would I be in the pantry? This unprompted, which is how you know the pantry mattered. Jonah, I was adjusting the ISO because the room went dark before the lights actually went out. Old habits make darkness useful. Zoe, I was listening to Noelle say nothing about something. She looked at the pantry door then, just once, like a person checks the weather. Alan took notes the way a dancer watched feet. She said, sometimes to see who flinched. When she finished, she asked a different question, the one that separates dinner parties from interrogations. Who had access to Noelle's garage, she said. Everyone, Vivian said. He wasn't a gatekeeper, he was a show and tell. Not everyone, Zoe said almost under her breath. Alan turned her head a degree. Meaning? Zoe's eyes did a small apology. Noelle liked to keep the expensive stuff locked. He liked to make a ceremony of getting it. Who had the fob? Alan asked. Me, Vivian said. At the same time, Rafi said, sometimes me, and Troy said he gave it to me when we were doing the shelves, and Morgan said he lent it to Kellen once, and Jonah said nothing at all. Alan held up a palm to stop the overlap. Thanks. She looked at me. Ivy? I have hands. I do not have a fob. Who would Noelle have kept it from? Alan asked the room. Zoe's mouth pressed thin. Jonah, she said. He didn't trust him not to turn the ritual into content. I never film Noelle without permission. Jonah took a breath like he was arranging it for a photo. You never asked, Zoe said. Enough, Alan said. Not loud, but in a tone that settled the room. We're going to wait for talks, but in the meantime, I want everyone to walk me through every object that moved between 10:30 and 10:45. Objects. The room became a diorama of gestures. Napkin to lap, glass to lips, knife to plate, phone to palm, hand to shoulder, glance to pantry door. I replayed them with my eyes closed and my hands folded. Noelle's fingers on the dimmer, Vivian's lipstick catch light in the mirror, Rafi's phone screen blooming like a fish, George's thumb on the stem of her glass, a small rub as if polishing luck, Troy's hand on the oven, Kellen's sigh into his texts, Morgan's ring twisting, Zoe's eyes soldier still. The text came back with early whispers, residue on the bottle lip that didn't belong to wine, crystalline and bitter, a certain class of things you don't need to know to fear. Alan's face didn't change, but the room felt like it shifted 2 degrees toward a cliff. Do we have to be here? Morgan asked. It's past 1. You'll be here until I say different, Alan said, almost kindly. I sipped water because my mouth felt like paper. The glass smelled of lemon and soap. In the reflection on the pane, we were versions of ourselves we might not keep. Zoe slipped her hand into mine and squeezed once. Don't fix it, she whispered. I don't know how to, and I meant it. The bottle had poison, the pantry had a fob, and the room had too many stories. But which story had teeth? Alan let me step onto the covered balcony for air, which is what you say when you want to breathe and not cry where everyone can see. The cedars smelled green, even in the rain. The city below was a smear of golds and reds, a watercolor left out in weather. I pressed my palms to the railing until the cold gave me a reason to stop thinking. Jonah stepped out, slow, like approaching a skittish animal. You okay? You're asking me that? I said, too sharp. How's your ISO? He ran a hand over his mouth. I didn't film. I know you think... I think you're a good man who sometimes mistakes curiosity for kindness, I said. I think Noel knew how to use that. His shoulders sagged. You think I did it? I think you had access and motive and a camera you can aim at anything. Honesty felt like chewing a coin. He leaned on the rail next to me, careful not to touch. Noel was going to ruin Rafi with that pavilion project, he said quietly. Vivian said so in the kitchen when you were in the pantry with the cop. He took investors' money, he spent it on a Pacific Coast retreat with Georgia. Rafi wanted to quit. Vivian told him to be a man about it. Why are you telling me this? Because Alan plays slow chess and I play speed, he said. Because you listen without making a face. Downstairs, a siren sulked past on the wet street. I could smell cigarette smoke from somewhere. Troy, probably, sneaking a guilt break in the side yard. Also, Jonah said, very soft, because Zoe went into the pantry earlier. When? After dessert, maybe 10:15. She said she was looking for candles. He swallowed. She had the fob. No, I said too quickly. She did. I saw her take it from the hook behind the panel. There wasn't a hook. There was earlier. I felt the night tilt. The double-sided tape inside the panel. A hook that used to live there. A fob that had to live somewhere. Did she unlock the fridge? I asked. I don't know. I'm not... He stopped. I didn't want to be that person again. A gust pushed rain under the eave, cold on my wrists. My job has rules. My friendship has more. Tell the detective and you risk making your best friend a suspect. Keep it and you become an accomplice to silence. Choices don't look like forks in the road. They look like knives at your own throat. I remembered Noel in the ER, laughing while I stitched him, and staring at his blood like a man in love. I remembered Zoe on my couch the week she left him, saying, he doesn't say sorry, he curates sorry. I remembered the sticky note on the wine, don't let Zoe pour. It could be a joke, it could be a grudge, it could be a dare. Ivy, Jonah said, what are you going to do? I wiped rain from my lip and tasted salt, like a story arriving. I'm going to tell Alan exactly what I saw, and exactly what I didn't. What didn't you see? I didn't see Zoe poison a bottle. I saw her go into a room. I looked at him, and I didn't see you not follow. He flinched, then nodded, the kind of nod that means I deserve that. I went back inside before I could change my mind. Alan watched me re-enter like I was trackable, like a dot on a map. I told her about the hook, the fob, the pantry, the candles that might not have been candles. She listened without interrupting. She asked 2 questions, time, and who else knew. I answered as precisely as a chart. She looked toward Zoe then, not like a hunter, but like a surgeon measuring the cut. There is a point in every code where you decide to crack the chest or call the time. I felt that same click then. Choice becoming action, action becoming consequence. I chose the cut. And if I cut, who would bleed? My friend or the truth? The house felt smaller by 2 a.m., like the walls had overheard too much. Rain softened, turning into a steady whisper, as if Portland itself was tired of shouting. Detective Allen spread her files across the marble island, each page pinned by a glass or a plate, like evidence disguised as leftovers. She asked me to sit with her, not as suspect, but as witness, though the line felt thin. You notice things, she said, voice level. I need your eyes. The guests rotated in for more questioning. I listened through walls the way you hear your neighbors argue without knowing the words. Vivian's tone rose, sharp and clipped. Rafi's laughter spilled, then died. Troy's footsteps paced like cage weight. Lydia cried quietly, the sound of fabric being wrung. When Zoe's turn came, silence thickened. My chest went still. She emerged 10 minutes later with mascara smudged, mouth a straight line that pretended not to tremble. She didn't look at me. That was worse than if she had. Alan leaned close. Your friend knows something. I wanted to argue. I wanted to shield. Instead, I told Alan what Jonah had confessed. The pantry, the hook, the fob. She listened, eyes steady. Then she showed me a photo on her phone.
The puncture in the wine bottle looked like nothing, a pinprick, but magnified, the foil told a story, a needle mark, deliberate. Somebody dosed the bottle, not during the blackout, earlier. The breath I took tasted of smoke that wasn't there, meaning Noelle's death was pre-written. She nodded once. The blackout was theater, a distraction. It landed like a second body in the room. We'd been staring at darkness when the danger was already inside the glass. So who killed the lights, and why cover a crime already committed?
The house had thinned into fragments. Some guests huddled, others paced, a few simply stared. I stepped onto the balcony again, needing the cold more than air. Mist hung above the river, silvered by street lamps, the city smeared like wet paint. Behind me, a door creaked. Zoe. Her shoulders were hunched against the rain, her cardigan damp, her eyes two storms. "You told her," she said. Not a question. "I was in the pantry," I said. "For candles," she whispered, then laughed without humor. "You don't believe me?" "Do I want to?" She pressed a hand to her forehead. "Noel was going to ruin me, Ivy. He had things, emails, photos, stories I told when I shouldn't have. He was planning to expose me at that table, make me small. He called it a joke. It wasn't." Her words tasted like truth and fear braided together. "So, you killed him?" I asked, quieter than the rain. She looked at me raw. I loved him, hated him, both, but I didn't touch that bottle. Footsteps interrupted. Jonah. Damp beanie pulled low. He looked between us, jaw tight. "Alan knows," he said. "She's about to pull us all into the garage." "For what?" I asked. "The fridge," he said. His voice cracked. "There's a camera inside, hidden. It recorded who took the bottle out." Zoe's face drained color. Jonah swallowed hard. And me? I felt the floor tilt under my shoes. Evidence doesn't lie, but people do, even when they're caught in its light. And if the fridge saw everything, whose shadow was about to be named? We gathered in the garage, rain dripping from coats, faces carved by exhaustion. Detective Allen stood by the wine fridge, monitor popped on a crate. She pressed play. Grainy footage. Timestamp, 9:54 p.m. A figure entered, blurred, but recognizable. Not Zoe, not Jonah, not even Vivian. Morgan. Her hair tied back, her coat neat. She moved with calm precision, lifted the gold ribbon bottle, set it on the counter, and produced a syringe from her purse. She punctured the foil, injected clear liquid, smoothed the metal with a thumb. Then she smiled at her reflection in the steel, as if rehearsing innocence, and placed the bottle back. The room's silence broke into a dozen sharp breaths. Kellen reached for her, voice cracking. "Morgan, why?" Her reply was simple. "Because Noel didn't deserve another birthday, and you were too blind to see it." Allen's team moved swiftly. Cuffs, rights, the scrape of duty against marble floor. Morgan didn't resist. She walked out like a guest leaving early, shoes clicking, echoing. The rest of us stood stranded in our own disbelief, like survivors of a storm that hadn't asked permission. Noel was gone. Morgan was guilty. But the party wasn't finished. Not for me. The rain stopped with the sunrise, leaving the city slick and shining. a new face over an old one. I sat on the balcony alone, cardigan wrapped tight, the house behind me humming with emptiness. I thought about Noel, his bracelets, his labels, the way he stared at blood like it was poetry. I thought about Morgan, precise and smiling, her crime disguised as routine. And I thought about myself, how easily truth hides in plain sight until someone pulls it into light. Nursing has taught me this. Bodies tell the truth, even when people don't. But last night, I learned something colder. Sometimes lies are easier to see than the truth standing right beside you.
The party ended hours ago, but in my head, the candles are still burning. And every time I close my eyes, I see the moment the lights went out, wondering what else the dark is hiding.